Hi everyone, this is Grace with ACTi. This is a webinar for the NVR3 basics. I just want to make sure everyone has not only a phone connection so that you can hear what I'm saying, but that you're also logged into the webinar on your computer so that you're going to be able to actually see the screen when I actually share the demo, okay? If you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to use the Q&A section on the webinar on the PC. I will try to answer questions as we go along. If there are any questions I don't get to address, whether it's because we run out of time or we just need to address it separately, feel free to go ahead and email me directly, okay? All right, so this is for the ACTi NVR3 basics. I am going to go over a couple basic things before we get to the actual software, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and once you see it, you should see the download center. So give me just a moment. All right, everyone should be seeing the ACTi download center right now. All right, so whenever you go on site to install any of the ACTi products, you want to make sure that you have the IP utility. That is essentially an IP scanner specifically for ACTi products. It will cover any ACTi camera that is on the network. So unable to grab it, you want to come into our ACTi website at www.acti.com. Click on Downloads here at the very top, and then type in IP utility in the global search on the left. Okay, and as long as you're using it for a computer, this is the latest IP utility that you want, version 44018 Standard Edition. Okay. If you ever need to look for firmware, all right, you just type in the model of your camera. Let's say you're looking for the A82. You come into the software and firmware download here, tell it that you're looking for camera encoder firmware, and you'll see the firmware at the very top, it will always be the latest. So you can see for this camera model here, it'll be the A30207. So once you actually download the IP utility, you're going to see an icon that looks like this on your Windows Start menu. Okay, so if you execute it, you'll see that all my cameras immediately come up that are on the network. I will see the current IP address that it is, the serial number, and the current firmware. So if you need to change the network address or upgrade the firmware, it's all done through the IP utility. Just check mark your camera, click on Firmware Upgrade, and then go ahead and browse and upload the firmware file that you unzipped from the ACTi Download Center. If you need to assign IP addresses to multiple cameras at once, it's also very easy to do so through the IP utility. You just check mark all your cameras, click on Change Network Address, tell it that you want a static IP address, and tell it what starting IP address you want to begin from. I don't recommend ever assigning anything 0100 just because that is the default IP address of ACTi cameras. So for example, we could start from 0101. So what's going to happen is if I were to hit apply, it's going to start assigning all my cameras 192.168.0.101, then 102, 103, 104, so on and so forth until all of the cameras have changed over their addresses. Okay, so if you ever need to look for your cameras, make sure they're still on the network, make sure they're still working. If you need to log into the cameras, you can click on the IP address here. Everything can be done from the IP utility, so it is a handy tool to have with you on site. Okay. All right, next I want to talk real quick about hard drives. If you come into the ACTi website here, on the main page, you'll be able to see we do have a lot of quick links. One particular very useful one is the project planner. If you come into the project planner, there are multiple different selectors we allow you to use. There are switches, there are PCs, there's bandwidth, etc. But I want to go ahead and show you guys the hard drive selector. So if you're installing your own, if you're installing one of the ACTi standalone units, you want to go ahead and make sure you check this hard drive selector first to make sure what hard drives have been tested to be compatible. So if you click on the hard drive selector here, you'll be able to see a list of the various devices that ACTi has. You can click on any of these units and you'll see exactly the ones that we've tested. Make sure you get the exact model, okay, and not just ones with the same specs. These are the only models that we can guarantee the compatibility of, okay. So once you do get your hard drive, all of the quick installation guides are available on the download center. Okay, so for example, if I got an INR 410, or let's say even 430, and I want to know how to install the hard drive into the system, you can go ahead and either filter farther by typing in Quick Installation Guide, or if you look on the list here, the Quick Installation Guide is right there. You open up the PDF, scroll down a little bit, it'll tell you how to physically install it, but finally it will tell you, walk you through step by step on how to install the hard drive into the software of the system. Some of them they need to go through the RAID controller, others you can just use the Windows Disk Management. So all of this is available through the manuals on the website. Okay. All right, when you do have an ACTi standalone NVR, you are going to see two LANs on the back like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a different photo here. So the point of having the two LANs in the back is so that you can separate out the camera traffic from the regular router traffic. So you want to go ahead and pick one of the LANs to go back to the switch with all the cameras and the other LAN port to go back to the router. So for example, if the router was 192.168.1, you want to make sure that you assign the camera LAN a completely different subnet, such as 192.168.0. And that way you'll not only separate all your camera traffic from the regular router traffic physically, but also through the IP subnet range, okay? So when you assign those addresses, make sure that you only assign that gateway under the LAN 2 address of the actual unit. So on your Windows system, you would just go to your Start menu, Control Panel, Network and Internet, Network and Sharing Center, change adapter settings, and you can find LAN 1, LAN 2 on the system. I'm just going to show you guys a quick example. So you right-click, click Properties, double-click IPv4, and again, you can assign your static IP address for LAN 1, LAN 2. Make sure that the only gateway and the only DNS is on LAN 2 going back to the router. Okay? All right, so that's, we just went over the IP utility, how to upgrade the firmware, how to look for the firmware, how to install your hard drive, how to select the hard drive for your system, and how to set up the network of the NVR3. Okay. So for the NVR3, just so you know, we do have different editions. We have the Corporate Edition and the Enterprise Edition. So if you type in the NVR3 and you're looking for the latest software update on your video management system, you'll see there is both Enterprise and Corporate. Most of our users, I would recommend that you go ahead and use the Enterprise unless you are looking to use additional functions that are available on the Corporate, such as POS, access control, Google Maps, etc. So most of the things I'm going to show you today are available on both the Enterprise and the Corporate. If I do go over anything that is Corporate only, I will make sure to point that out. Okay? All right, so when you download the NVR3, you can access it either through the workstation icon, which will look something like this, or you can access it by typing in the IP address into the actual Internet Explorer. The interface will be exactly the same. The workstation will be as fast or faster, but just for today's purposes, I am going to use the Internet Explorer. So this is the login page. We can go ahead and log on in with the login of the NVR3. All right, so this is what we call our live view page. If you look on the right-hand side, there are 3 tabs. First one is the live view, second one is playback, third is for the setup, okay? I'm going to try and go over as much of the basics as I can today. If I'm not able to go through all of it, I will carry it over into the next webinar, which starts an hour after this one. It's more of the advanced functions, but whatever I don't cover, finish covering under basics, I will cover it under the advanced. Okay, so this is our live view page where obviously you can see all of your cameras in real time. It's very simple. In order to get cameras out on the screen, all you have to do is click and drag your camera, or what you can do is you can double click on a camera and it will move it to the next available space on the live view. as you can see, if I hover my mouse over any of the camera views, I get the small playback bar here at the bottom. This is what we call our instant playback function. So right now, all the cameras are in live view, but let's say something just happened. You need to be able to check whether or not that is an important event that just occurred. You could jump over into the playback and see the recordings of all of the cameras, but the problem is you only want to see it for one camera and without losing the functionality of seeing the live view for all of the other ones. So what you can do is you can use this instant playback function. So if I click on the play button here, I'll automatically go into a mini playback interface for this camera while still seeing the live view of all of my other cameras. In fact, if I wanted to keep monitoring what was going on, I could drag this camera out onto the live view, still watch it in real time while looking for a particular event here in the playback. We can speed it up, slow it down. We can even jump to a particular date and time in case someone comes in and says they just need to bookmark something real quick. You can pause, jump to the current time, take snapshots, and once you're done, go back to the live view. So let's go ahead and go back to maybe sometime earlier this morning. Let's see if we can't make a bookmark, and I will show you guys how to search for that bookmark later on. Okay. So let's say we realize that this was a particular point of entry that needs to be recorded. We can go ahead and bookmark this. We can call this, let's say, the front entrance, and we can call it trespassing, for example. And we can go ahead and look for it later on. So once we're done with the instant playback, we just click on the eye here and go right back to the live view mode. Okay. This is also accessible if you right-click on the camera itself and click on playback mode. Right-click again, you can click on live view mode. Okay. All right. So if a particular camera, you want to go ahead and zoom in to see a particular part of the video, you can right-click, click on the digital zoom, and all you have to do is click and drag your mouse over the screen, and you'll see that immediately it will start digitally zooming in. So the digital zoom in just blows up your pixels, so the farther you zoom in, the more pixelated it's going to get, as you can see. Okay, and once you're done, you just right-click within the red box, and it will go right back to your regular live view page. If you need to be able to see this camera only real quick, just double-click on the camera. It'll bring it up as the only one. Double-click again, and it'll go right back to your original view. If a particular camera does have optical zooming functions where the lens is actually a zoom lens, so you're not just blowing up pixels, you'll be able to use those functionalities using the PTZ panel on the left. So if you go ahead and minimize all these tabs, you'll see your PTZ panel here on the bottom. If a particular camera does not have PTZ functions, you will see it grayed out like this. So as you can see right now, I'm selecting the map in the bottom right corner. It's highlighted in orange. That's why the PTZ panel is not lighted up. But if I click on a camera that does have those functions, you'll see that I can go up and down, left and right, zooming in and zooming out, refocusing, etc. Okay, and even with optical cameras, you can digitally zoom in as well, should that meet your needs better. All right. Okay. So we just went over viewing, zooming, instant playback, bringing up one of the cameras as a view in the live view. Let's go ahead and talk about how to create one of these views. Okay. So you can see all of your views here are listed here on the left. We do have various view layouts here at the top. Okay. But let's say that you need a particular layout that we don't already offer. That's totally fine. You can actually customize your own view. So if you come up here to the top, if you ever forget what any of these shortcuts mean, just hover over it and it will go ahead and tell you. Let's tell it we want to create a brand new view. You can select to put it under a pre-existing group folders of views that you already have, or you can go ahead and add it as a new group. And for our view name, we're just going to call this tutorial. So when you do add it as a new group, you can choose whether or not you'd like to have it as a public view or if you'd like to have it as a private view. So if the view is private, that means only the users in your particular user group are allowed to see this. And so sometimes you have managers who want to see one thing, maybe the guards down at the guard shack want to see another, so this way you can really customize which views are appropriate for each particular group. You can also set it as a default view if this is the first thing that you want customers to see when they initially log in on their NVR3. So let's go ahead and create this view. You'll see here now I have my new group folder here under my views, and tutorial is right here. Okay, so if we want to customize our view according to what we'd like it to look like, all we have to do is now click on the edit view. You'll see this gray square pop up in the bottom right-hand corner. You can click and drag, and let's say you want one camera to be the largest. Let's say you have a camera looking at a hallway. You want it long-wise, and you go ahead and make it, customize it accordingly to what you and your customers' needs are. Okay, and once you're done, you can go ahead and click on the Save View button here at the top, and you'll see that your customized views show up accordingly on this page. Okay. All right. Once you do create a view, you can see that not only can you click and drag cameras out onto the screen, but you can also create these e-maps. On the corporate edition of the NVR3, you can actually use Google Maps instead of uploading your own JPEG images, okay? So on these images, you can drag out cameras, you can drag out view shortcuts as well. And this is also very simple to do. All you have to do is when you are in the edit view, okay, you just click on the Create Map button here, and you can upload pre-existing maps that you have or upload a brand new one. Okay, and once that you do, you can go ahead and start clicking and dragging cameras out onto the screen. You can click and drag views out onto the screen, all right, and you'll see that there is a shadow of the camera that you can actually rotate around just so it's easier for you and your customer to know which direction this camera is looking in. Just so you know, the shadow is not to scale, it's just for your reference for a direction. And once you're done, you can go ahead and click on the Save View button. All right, and you will see a brand new EMAP view. So what's particularly nice about this EMAP is, let's say you're looking at this particular site, and somebody says that at this site here, there's something really important going on that you need to be able to take a look at. So all you have to do is double-click on one of the cameras, and it will automatically bring up a live view shot of your camera. Okay, and once you're done, you can double-click on it again, and the view will go away. So let's say that you realize that there is something very important going on at this camera. You need to be able to address it right away. As long as you have a shortcut to that view, you can go ahead and click on that view shortcut. It will automatically bring you over to that site. Okay, and so this is a very simple way to navigate in between various sites without having to remember all of the site names and scrolling through all your views here, scrolling through all your cameras, etc. And as you can see, once you're done, if I have an EMAP on this view as well, I have another link back to my main control center page, and I can jump right back to the main page. Okay. All right. Other than that, there are other various functions that you can go ahead and browse through. If you ever need to know what version of your NVR that you have, you want to click on the letter I in the top right-hand corner, and it will tell you your edition, and it will tell you your version as well. Okay, last but not least, let's go over the visual tracking. This I'll show you how to set up when we get to the setup page under the advanced webinar. But basically what you can do, if you click on any of these visual tracking, you can basically see right around the corner. So basically our entrance is right around the corner to the sidewalk. Let's say we had a person walking straight through. We want to be able to follow them without having to browse through here as to the very next camera. Maybe someone forgot to put it on this main screen, or maybe you're only looking at the outdoors. You can actually click on this box and it will automatically jump over to that camera. So it's a very easy way to look around corners, into buildings, and just having various shortcuts on the live view page. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the playback. So whatever cameras you had on the whatever cameras you had on the live view screen, it will automatically bring over into the playback as well. You can right-click and remove anything that you don't want to see. And you can actually click and drag on the playback bar, same thing as the instant playback, in order to see your various recordings. So this is the bookmark that we made earlier in the webinar. You'll see that it does show up on the time bar, but I will show you guys how to separately search for that as well. And so, okay. You can fast forward any of your recordings. You can slow it down all the way down to the F speed. So that stands for frame by frame. So if you're ever looking for the perfect shot of a face, or maybe even a license plate, frame by frame is actually going to be one of your best friends. So let's say we want to lower the time range that we're looking at from 1 hour down to 10 minutes, okay? And if you take a look at the numbers here, you'll see that every time I click play, it's jumping every 30 frames. So this way, I'll be able to click as many times as I need to try to figure out what is the best angle in order to get the face or the license plate that I'm looking for. Okay? So let's go ahead and put that back to 1. So as you can see, we can change the time range down to 10 minutes all the way up to 1 day. There's still a calendar here for you to jump to a particular date and time. If you ever get lost on the playback bar, you can click on the arrow here to go to the current time. If you ever get lost and you want to know the previous recording, just click on the previous recording button here. And if you ever were recording based on motion or had gaps, you can go ahead and click on the next recording button here, and it will automatically jump to the next recording that you have for that particular camera. Okay? All right, so let's talk about how to export the video when you actually find what you need. Okay? So once you do find the recording that you're looking for, let's say this is what we want to export, you can either click on your export video button here, okay? You can right-click and click on export video, and it'll bring up this export video box for you as well. So here, if you know exactly the time range that you want to export, you can go ahead and fill out the time duration here. Let's say you just want everything from 8:30 to 8:35, and just fill it out and hit apply. But a lot of times you don't know what exactly the time range that you're trying to export. So what you can do is you can go ahead and watch your playback, and let's say that you realize this is where the incident began. So you can right-click on the playback bar, click on Mark Export Start, go ahead and let it play, and we're just going to fast forward a little bit. So let's say we realize this is about when the incident ended. Okay, we can click and drag as well. All right, and once we realize that's where it ended, right-click again on the playback bar, tell it to mark Export End. Right-click one more time and click on Export Video, and you'll see that the section that we highlighted is automatically filled into the time duration here. And so that saves you a lot of time trying to scribble down on a piece of paper or your cell phone the exact hour, minute, and seconds range that you're trying to export. Okay, so we do allow a couple different file formats when you export it out. If you look here under video type, there's AVI, RAW, and player. So for the AVI, that's a very simple format to play back. Any Windows PC is going to be able to play it back with the Windows Media Player that comes embedded. You can skip over the video gaps. Basically, if you were recording on motion, you don't want to sit through all that black footage, you can go ahead and tell it to skip those. It'll compress all the data together, but still keep the correct timestamps. Okay. If you wanted to write anything on the footage, if you wanted to have any other overlays, if you wanted to change the style, where they're located, the color, the font, etc., that's all located here. And once you're done, you can go ahead and browse for the file path that you would like to save it to, basically anywhere that that particular computer has access to, and you hit apply. Okay, so AVI is a very simple format to play back. However, when you do export it, it is going to take a little bit more time just because it's not only trying to export your video, it is trying to convert it from the original .raw format as well. So depending on the network, I've seen RAW files export out 10 times faster than the AVI. So if I was trying to export out a 1-minute clip, the AVI might take that whole 1 minute in order to export out that footage, whereas with if I just wanted to export that 1-minute clip out as a raw footage, it's going to export it out probably within 10 seconds or faster. So if you just need to get in and out of a site, I recommend that you go ahead and export it out as a raw and convert it later. So with the RAW, you can still skip video gaps. A lot of times the authorities will want a .raw. It does vary between jurisdictions, so you'll just have to check with them. But they want something that has been unaltered, doesn't have any timestamps on it other than the file itself. And so you can go ahead and export it as RAW, browse for where you want it to go, and hit apply. So afterwards, how do you play back this RAW format? You want to come into the download center here, and you want to download what is called the archive player. So if you search for it under the global search, you'll be able to see the zip file come up here. It's very, very straightforward to use, but if you do need instructions, there's the user manual here. And afterwards, after playing it back, if you want to convert it back to an AVI offsite, you can go ahead and come into the global search here, search for media converter, and you'll be able to find the zip file here. Again, it's very straightforward to use, but if you need instructions, they're there. And just so you know, all of these downloads are for free on our download center. Okay, so with the RAW file, it exports very quickly, but you do need to get a separate player in order to play it back. You might need to convert it later. AVI will take longer, but it's much easier to view. So there is a compromise between the two formats, and that is what we call our player format. So the player format will export out the video about as fast as a RAW file, but it comes embedded with its own player, so you don't need to go to the website and download the archive player separately to play it back. One of the limitations with the player is it will only allow you to export up to 4 cameras at one time, okay, in the same time range. So if you need more than that, you may need to consider the other options. So once you do export it out as a player, you're going to see an icon look like this in your particular where you decide to save it, and you'll see a small playback interface, same as the playback that we've been looking at. Okay. So you can play, you can jump to the next recording, etc. What's nice about this player is you can actually follow an event through multiple different cameras, different sites, okay? So if someone was walking through various cameras and you need to be able to follow them, you can go ahead and let the footage play, double-click on one of the cameras, watch what they're doing here, then jump to the next one, watch what they're doing here, and the whole time the player just keeps playing on, so you don't actually miss any of the footage, and you don't have to try to string together different footages of different times of the same person, etc. Okay, you can just export it out together with the player. Very useful in retail, schools, etc. Okay. All right. So once you're done exporting the video, you can go ahead and clear that selection up, and you'll be able to see your playback bar again. So as you can see, there are green marks here on the playback bar. This is anywhere where the camera detected motion. Basically, anytime where you set up the motion detection and it detected something. All right. There are various ways in order to have easier searches as well, and we will go over those in the advanced webinar. But just so you know how to look for your bookmarks, you can come into the bookmark search here on the left, click Start. Search for a particular keyword or device. I believe, called it front entrance and trespassing. So I can go ahead and search for the word trespassing. I'll see a thumbnail of all the results. You can double click on it and jump, and it will help you jump exactly to that particular date and time on the playback bar. Okay, so that's about it for our playback. Let's go ahead and go into the setup of the NVR3. So in the setup, you want to go ahead and go into devices. You can click add. You can have it go ahead and automatically search for all your cameras, or you can add your camera manually as well. Just make sure that after you add your cameras, you do click on get device settings before you click on apply, all right, so that the NVR is able to read the camera properly. You can tell if you forgot to click on get device settings because once you do actually add your camera in, you are going to be missing some crucial information. So for example, if you scroll on down to the bottom of your camera, you have to see where it says the serial number and the current firmware on the camera. If you do not see this information, remember to click on Get Device Settings and then hit Apply. Okay, so that's how you can add your cameras. Once you have your cameras added in, this is essentially what you're going to see. There's the Basic tab, Video tab, etc. Okay, so if you need to adjust any of the camera settings, you can come into Video here, click on Video Adjustment. The top two adjustments I would recommend you to go ahead and look at is the shutter speed and the wide dynamic range. So the shutter speed, if you start getting any sort of ghosting, motion blur, people are leaving a trail behind them as they move, you want to increase the shutter speed. All right, so usually I recommend setting it at 1/15, and then if need be, you can bump it up incrementally based on how fast objects are going through. Okay, just do it incrementally just because when you do bump up the shutter speed, your picture is going to get darker just because that shutter is closing faster, and you're going to get more noise in the picture. As for wide dynamic range, this particular setting is to balance out the contrast between areas that are super dark and areas that are super bright. Okay, again, bump it up incrementally just because the higher you go, the more noise you're going to get in the picture as well. If you installed your camera upside down, don't panic. You can always flip and or mirror the image here under the video adjustment. Okay, so this is a 180 degrees. All right. Okay. Okay, so when you want to go ahead and set the settings on your cameras, you'll see all the cameras should have Media 1, Media 2, which is basically Stream 1, Stream 2. Some cameras, such as this one, are going to have multiple streams, all right, so keep that in mind as well. So the main setting you want to pay attention to is especially the bit rate of the camera. So the bit rate should be set according to what the resolution of the camera is. So if you take a look here, you'll see that my resolution is 1920 by 1080. So what does that actually mean? So if I take out my calculator, I multiply them together, you'll see that there is about 2 million pixels here. This is how we find out that this is a 2 megapixel camera, 2 million. Okay, so if you're having your resolution at about 2 megapixels, you want your bit rate to be about comparable to that. So your bit rate for a 2 megapixel camera should be no more than 2 or 3. Okay, and that will help make sure you don't overuse the bandwidth, and it really cuts down on the amount of unnecessary traffic in the network. So for example, if I had a 4 megapixel camera, then my bit rate should be about 4 to 5. Okay. So it does depend on the camera model, but if you can set your bitrate mode to variable, and you can see that when you do so, you are still allowed to give it a maximum bitrate, then you want to set your bitrate mode to variable. If putting it on variable, you do not see this option for maximum bitrate, make sure that you only set the bitrate mode to constant instead so that you can set that maximum bitrate. Okay, so that's Media 1. Media 2, same rules. Here my resolution is pretty close to 384. I do have the option for maximum bitrate when I set it to variable, so I'm going to leave my bitrate on variable in order to get the best, most efficient use out of their bandwidth. Okay. So you want to set up both Media 1, Media 2, just because some customers, maybe their traffic isn't very good, okay, they don't have that much bandwidth. You want to really utilize the computer's resources the best. So what we do is we cap off Media 2 to be a lower resolution than Media 1. So usually I put it to VGA 644 by 480 or maybe 720p. So then what you can do is here on the Basic tab, you can set it so that the default live view stream is always stream 2 and the recording stream is stream 1. Most of the time, especially when you have so many cameras out on the live view screen, you can't tell the difference between stream 1 and stream 2 anyways. 5 megapixel, 2 megapixel, 1 megapixel, you can't really tell. So there's no point to pulling across all of that information if you're not even going to be able to see a difference. So that's why we recommend that you put default live view stream as stream 2. If you ever need to test out what it looks like, you can always toggle here under the settings. You'll see because we're only looking at one camera right now, it is pretty blown up. You can tell the difference between stream 1 and stream 2. But oftentimes on the live view page, especially when you have so many cameras, you really cannot tell right now whether this is on stream 1 or stream 2. Okay, so for example, this is stream 2 right now, but if I were to put it to a, if I were to blow it up as a single view, you can toggle it over. Okay, so that they can go ahead and see the best quality view if there's something going on at that particular camera. Okay, so that's about it for the camera specific settings, I would say. So how do you set up motion, right? Let me pick a different camera. That makes a little more sense. Okay, let's do this camera. So you want to come into the video tab here. You want to click on motion detection here. and you want to click on Motion Setup. All right. So you want to make sure that you use as many boxes as possible. Please do not use one giant box for the whole scene. That makes it very inaccurate. Okay. So as you can see, I have 3 different boxes over 3 different areas looking at different things for different purposes. So by default, the sensitivity is usually 70. That's usually enough. What you want to take a look at is actually your threshold percentage. So the sensitivity values of a particular camera is how sensitive each individual pixel is to any sort of change. So like I said, 70 is usually enough, but the threshold percentage is the percent of those sensitive pixels that have to be triggered in order for it to become motion. So right now in box number 1 with threshold 10%, anything that does not trigger at least 10% of this box is not going to be considered motion. Okay, so a lot of times, for example, maybe we're just looking for cars. We don't care about children. We don't care about dogs, etc. We want to make sure we set a threshold percentage that will trigger cars, but not people. So for example, a person is unlikely to take up, I think, 60% of that box, but a car parked in that space definitely will. So if I just want to know when that car is moving or exiting, I could do a threshold percentage of 60, and that would make sure it only triggers cars, not people. Okay. All right, and so as you can see, I don't have boxes over the entire region. You don't even need to cover sometimes the entire sidewalk. For example, on this sidewalk, a person walking on it is definitely going to walk through this box, so I don't need to cover this entire area, okay? And that makes the threshold percentage that much more accurate. You want to use a box for every depth of the picture as well. So for example, I don't want to draw this box over the back of the parking lot plus the sidewalk. It's just too much of a depth. So maybe a box for the back of the parking lot, a box for the center, and a box for the actual sidewalk. Okay, so make sure as many boxes as necessary. You only cover areas that you need, so don't cover trees, sky, ceiling, okay, unless you need to see something on the ceiling, I suppose. And make sure it's the correct size and correct depth. And after everything is done, you just hit apply and you hit close. Okay? All right, so if you ever need to copy any of the bitrate settings, basic settings, any of the other cameras, just click on the copy button at the top. You'll see that video settings can only be copied over to cameras of the same model, okay, but basic settings can be copied over to any of the other cameras. Okay? All right. Okay, let's talk about the schedule tab real quick. So here you can see an overview of how all of your cameras are recording. Red is schedule recording, blue is event. The diagonal lines are for event handling. So if we click on any one of the cameras, we'll be able to go ahead and edit it. As you can see, this camera is recording full-time between about 3:30 to 5:30. Otherwise, it's only recording based on motion. And it's only allowed to handle events that you set up later in the event tab after, what is this, midnight to 5:30, okay? And so I will go over the event tab in the advanced webinar. So if your camera is recording based on motion, this is where you can tell it how many seconds before and how many seconds after the motion you want it to record. So right now it will record 5 seconds before and 30 seconds after. Okay? Don't get confused by this keep recording files. This will only erase your files faster. So if you, some places they're only allowed to keep things by law for 30 days. So even though they have the storage space for 60 days, they have to erase after 30. So that's why that function is in there. If you only have space for 30 days, but you set this to 60, it's going to completely ignore you because there's not enough space. Okay? All right. Let's go into the storage tab. Make sure you never record to the C drive, okay? That's where the OS is, never a good idea. You can record to any of the other drives, okay? As for the reserve space, you want to calculate this based on the number of cameras that you have. So, for example, I have 7 cameras. Every camera, you can estimate it's going to need at least 2 gig of space for the hard drives to be able to keep up with the reading and writing speed. So if I have 7 cameras, that's 14. Maybe something like 20 would be enough, okay? So just make sure you calculate your reserve space based on the numbers that, based on the number of cameras that you have. Okay. If you ever see warning signs under the free space telling you that it's getting close to the reserved space, there's not much need to worry. It's just telling you that it's going to start overwriting the files on that drive automatically. Okay. So it'll fill up this drive, then this one, and then it'll go to the oldest recordings, start erasing, and then overwriting those. So you don't need to worry about that unless you see the free space significantly below the reserved space. Significantly meaning if this was set at 20, you see it at, or if it was set at 40, you see it at 35 or 30. That's not okay. But if you see it at 38, 39, it's fine. Okay? All right. Next, let's talk about users. We're getting pretty close to finishing up. So users, we have user groups and users. If you don't see the users tabs, don't freak out. It is minimized here at the bottom. Okay, you can have as many user groups and users as you'd like. So you can have as many users within a user group as you'd like as well. So for example, you have a user group that is called the guard shack, but you have many different guards that are at that guard shack. So you would have multiple users within the guard shack. So if you need to create a user, you can go ahead and click on Add, type in their account and password, give them a name so you know who this belongs to in case their account is something weird, and you specify which group they belong under. So that way, if somebody does have to leave the company or leave the site, you can just delete their particular login instead of having to tell everybody to change their login information. Okay. So under user groups, you can always add new user groups. We do support Active Directory as well, okay, for you guys to use. And so if you do need to use Active Directory, it will be available on either edition of the NVR3, either Enterprise or Corporate, okay? So let's see. Let's go ahead and get back in. Sorry about that, guys. It was trying to import an Active Directory automatically. Okay. So once we're back in user groups and you go ahead and add the user group that you want, all the permissions, login permissions, camera permissions are determined per user group. So if there are multiple people that need to have the same permission, make sure you put them in the same user group together. So here you can click on the user group. You'll see that on this particular login, we're allowed to do almost everything except adding a POS, adding extended device, sending notifications, so on and so forth. So especially if it's an end user, oftentimes you don't want them touching the setup. You can uncheck it here. There are specific camera permissions as well. Sometimes you don't want maybe certain employees to see certain cameras. You only want the managers to do so. You can separate out two different user groups then and uncheck the cameras. So as you can see, there are cameras being hidden right now, but for the cameras that they are allowed to see, you can also make very specific permissions for them as well, on not being allowed to touch the setup, not being able to see the playback, not touching the PTZ. Some sites, you don't want them messing it around, and then suddenly they're not looking where they need to look. Okay? If you don't want them exporting any video, you can restrict that as well. So it can be individualized. You can also unify the settings, meaning all the cameras have the same functions. So remember when I talked about public and private views on the live view page? Basically, if we have a private view on the tutorial, that means only everyone as a user under this tutorial user group can see that view. Everybody else is not going to see that view when they log in. Okay? All right. Last but not least, after everything is said and done, make sure you come in here and you make a backup file. It takes 2 seconds. As you can see, I'll put it to my desktop. 2 seconds, done. And it just saves all of my settings, all of my camera names, IP addresses, storage settings, schedule, everything. So in case a server dies, okay, as long as you have this backup file, all you have to do is come in here, restore the file, takes 2 seconds, everything's back up. So please make a backup file. This will save you hours and hours of trying to reinstall a server that went down, okay? If you do need to install license keys, you want to do it here under the License tab. You want to go ahead and grab the license key that you were given by ACTi. You'll see the member email and password. Essentially, this is the email address and password that you set up here on the ACTi webpage. If you don't have one, just register real quick. It's free. It takes 5 minutes, and you'll be able to go ahead and register your license keys. Let's say that you didn't have the server doesn't have access to the internet, then in order to register your license key, you're going to have to do offline registration, meaning you need to first go to a computer that does have internet access, go into support, register your license key. It's going to email you a .lic file, okay? And you'll be able to import the .lic file here and hit apply. There are license keys for ACTi cameras, and there are separate license keys for non-ACTi cameras. Okay, so make sure when you purchase it, you know the difference. The license key also matters depending on what edition you're using. So make sure if you're using corporate, you purchase corporate ACTi camera license keys, not enterprise. Okay, that's about it for today. We will have the advanced webinar in about 15 minutes, so if you guys want to go ahead and join that, you can. Oh, one last thing. If you need to change the port of your NVR3, come into the bottom right-hand corner here, look for your icons. You'll see the NVR3 Administrator tool. If you don't, go to your Start menu, search for NVR3, and you'll find it, and it should show up here as an icon. Double-click on that, and you'll see this is where you can change the port of the NVR should you need to port forward your NVR to a different port. By default, it is on port 80, okay? And so that's what you want to go ahead and do. Thanks for watching today, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up with sales. All right, thanks and have a great day.